The Journal of John Gabriel Stedman, 1744 to 1797. June 9, 1795, the Apollo Gardens. Marylebone, Madagascar bat as big as a duck. June 24, how dreadful London, where a Mr. B declared openly his lust for infants, his thirst for regicide, and believes in no God whatever. August, met 300 whores in the Strand, saw a mermaid. September, all knaves and fools and cruel to the excess. Blake was mobbed and robbed. A friend wrote from Kent, Ohio last year. The Midwest is full of people who want to write poetry and want to listen to it. This year, the National Guard, weeping with pity and fright, kill 4 students, firing into the mob. Nobody cared. Nobody remembers the Korean police action. Nobody will remember our advisory mission to Indochina. Why are they doing it? Why are they? Oh, never mind. Am I supposed to judge them? Don't you remember being high and weeding the garden? And whatever is really beautiful can't be destroyed. We can't get our hands on it. The truly great have all one age and from one visible space shed influence. They, both in power and act, are permanent, and time is not with them, save as it worketh for them, they in it. Samuel Taylor Coleridge to William Wordsworth. Endless weedy babble comes away easily. The flowers feel different, having been intentionally placed by living fingers, which I also feel. Just think of it as a large allegorical painting, nude figures, red velvet drapery, white marble, classical architecture, Parthenon Bank of Chemical Pantheon Library, America devouring her own young. The soldiers are also our children. We've lied to them too. Americanism, baseball, commerce, democracy, education, fanaticism, golf, home economics, ignorance, the complete college curriculum. Then put them into uniform and turn them loose with guns to kill hate-filled, long-haired, dirty, dope, fiend, calm, simp. Nobody cares because nothing really happened. It was on the TV. Everybody will get up, wash off the ketchup, collect union wages, and go home. Nobody cares. Nobody thinks anything about it. No thoughts at all. A succession of needs and little raunchy schemes. They should have killed a few hundred more. All a communist plot to move blacks into suburbs, turn over the country to freeloaders, dope fiend, hippie queers. The American Revolution was a tax dodge, dreamed up by some smart Harvard men who got some good out of it. A few of their high society friends also scored. Russian Revolution, a strictly ugly downtown proposition, the great unwashed on a rampage. No reference to mystical rights to life and pursuable happiness guaranteed by 18th century rationalist deity and curly wig. Old man potters down the lane singing, stops to search the roadside flowers and weeds for some particular leaf that he puts in plastic bag of greens. Last night's old man, Kondo Kenzo, 80 some odd years, performed the no of Moto Meizuka, acting a young girl and her ghost frying in hell. We all kept waiting for him to stumble, collapse, fall off the stage, disintegrate. But the longer we watched, the clearer it became. The stage, the entire theater might collapse much sooner, fall to sand and rust and splintered beams. Mr. Kondo would still be there, singing and dancing, every fold of his costume in place, 500 years. It pleases folks in Washington, D.C. to imagine the Russian Revolution is going to flop any minute now. After 50 years, the insurgent Bolsheviki will be put down, the dear Tsar restored as modern constitutional monarch. We did it in Tokyo, didn't we? And the patriarch of the church will crown him in St. Basil's, while the Don Cossack choir, beards and gold brocades, chant Slavonic liturgies and full-color satellite TV, an example to the benighted everywhere. If only we will pay just a little bit more and hire a few more FBI men. A few inches of adhesive tape seals the mouth, but it is hard to get rid of the idea of liberty. After 40 years of war, Asia still exists, not to mention the Viet Cong, and quite different from the plans of Washington or Moscow or the Vatican. Napoleon said, "China, sleeping giant, I shudder to think what happened when he wake." Adhesive tape in federal court, nothing wrong with the system. You'll get a chance to talk later. Federal court held together with gum Arabic and Chicago cops. Nara has a great magical feeling. The city no longer exists. The first capital, restored fragments of temples carefully excavated, site of imperial palace and the rice fields. Like Olson, I've been writing about the wrong town. Worcester, I'm from Worcester. Others about Gloucester. I've been writing about the wrong town all this time. Vancouver, 1963. Kent State, Jackson State. There was no reason to kill them. Fusillade into an unarmed crowd of children. I can't forgive us for feeding them to the bears currently raiding Wall Street. Painless extraction time again, squeezing water out of the stalks, blood out of the suckers. Everybody hopes to catch a nice gob of the goo, but there's never quite enough. Didn't you hear about the reservations? You were supposed to phone ahead for reservations in advance. Never quite enough. The official party had to be served first. Never quite enough, because it was planned that way. My grandmother used to say, and so he was left, S-O-L. I asked her, what's that mean? Certainly out of luck. Those that's got gets, them that ain't is S-O-L. Oh, the coat and the pants do all of the work, but the vest gets all the gravy. We complain of Tiberius and the White House, but consider Caligula waits fretfully in some provincial capital. Capital removed to Fukuhara. Como no Chome reporting, 6th month, 1180. To the north, the land rose up high along a ridge of hills, and to the south sloped down to the sea. The roar of the waves made a constant din, and the salt winds were of a terrible severity. The palace was in the mountains, and suggesting as it did the log construction of the ancient palaces, was not without its charms. The manners of the capital had suddenly changed and were now exactly like those of rustic soldiers. Oregon City by the paper mill falls of Willamette. There's Dr. John McLaughlin's big white house, retired magnificence of Hudson Bay Company, benefactor of our pioneer ancestors. John Jacob Astor ran him out of business. Washington Irving described all but the money. Where was the capital? Champoeg, Oregon City, Portland, Salem. The money is in Portland, the university in Eugene, the capital in Salem. Life along the Willamette River, now a stinkhole. Paper, puke, sulfur trioxide, and mercury. The lesser towns contribute only garbage and human excrement. The capital's great brass dome warping, melting in the flames. Hand-carved oak and myrtle and walnut paneling, state house in the park, toy stage set blazing. A lost art, my father used to say. Nobody knows how they do it anymore. Palaces by Van Brugh, mansions and water gates of Inigo Jones, gardens by Capability Brown, blazing. September 2, a lamentable fire, the wind being eastward blew clouds of smoke over Oxon the next day. The moon was darkened by clouds of smoke and looked reddish. The fire or flame made a noise like the waves of the sea, so says Anthony A. Wood. Yet there are still remaining Shosoin, parts of the Hori-Uji, Yakushiji, Toshadaiji. The capital disappeared around them. Byodoin and Muraji, parts of Daikoji, too far away from the battlefields, and from carelessness, perhaps. These can still be seen in spite of earthquake, ambition, silliness, the 1,000 Buddhas at Sanju, Sangendo, the others at the Toji, survived, though the city was flattened 8 or 10 times in a row.
Jack used to say, someday you and Gary and Alan and me will all be old bums under a bridge down by the railroad tracks. We'll say, remember when we was all out there in California years ago? Gentle rain from gray black lump clouds, fine pale blue sky, 3-color cat sits on weed pile, near but not under the largest branch of Mount Koya pine. All I can say this morning is a dance, which can't be recorded here. A wish to be free from orders, notions, whims, mine or other people's. Waiting for the laundry delivery man, waiting for 95 liters of kerosene, chrysanthemum yellow starfish 2-foot petals. Ancient Orient, shortest route to the forebrain through olfactory lobes. Longest way around is the shortest way home. A little trip through the anima mundi, now show. Now currently appearing a persistent vision, when it happens at the correct speed. But if you get too close, it is only patterns of light. Drop candy and try to follow it. Creates new place and time. Looking up, I see blank staring faces, reflecting steady silver glow. Silence. Under the bright umbrella, University of British Columbia, beer on the terrace of the faculty club, Alan and Bob straightening out something complicated, Olson sighing the while. I hear you. 1, 4, 3, I hear you. 1, 4, 3, miner's ledge light. 1, 4, 3, I love you. 1, 4, 3, miner's ledge light. You remember, don't you, Bob? 1, 4, 3, I love you. What better way to remember? Do intelligent questions get interesting answers? All I know is every time I get mixed up with rich folks, it costs me all the money I have in my pocket. Curious elision, Lord have mercy upon us. Michelangelo, Cole Porter variations day and night and day, waking and sleeping. That's what that's all about. A man with titties like a woman with muscles like a man. To Europe? I must have adorned it with a strange grimace, but my inspiration had been right. To Europe, Henry James. Pierre who? Coming and going. Well, if you got drunk and climbed up to the top of the door and took off all your clothes and passed out cold, how would you look? No matter how far we travel, we find most of the world living as quasi-civilized nomads among polished marble ruins of great cultures. The quality of life and the meaning of these remains are quite imperfectly known to us, no matter how skillfully we parse the verbs of lost languages. All ignorantly, we project our own savagery and cannibalism upon societies and individuals who were our civilized ancestors. Christ now returns under the name USA, rages wild across the earth to avenge himself. Napalm and nuclear bombs for every insult, every prick of thorn crown. Not peace, but a sword, curious elision. Lays about him burning and smashing, murdering the sea. The war continues because it is profitable. It's making good money for those who had money to invest in it from the beginning. Curious elision for all who did not. All of a sudden, it became as if nothing had happened and that was the end. Babies we creep out of water sack, hid there by young men. Old we slide into firebox, drift up the flue to heaven, a natural history, a narrow escape. What happened? Walked to local coffee shop, tomato juice, start home via Nanaji temple grounds, people chanting in front of Magic Fudo Spring. I went to look at the mijo, then realized I was sick, or at least beleaguered by creep vibrations. Clearly time for magical cure. I poured water over Fudo, his rocky image, chanted his mantra and bowed. I also rubbed magic water on my head. Old lady caretaker delighted. She said I had done well and wished for my rapid recovery. To enforce the cure, I visited Fudo Spring at Kiyomizudera, the Kwanan, and other Buddhas there. Expensive tempura lunch with view of Chian in the Eastern Mountains, and a glimpse of Momoyama Castle. Glimpse has a marvelous sound like Limkin and Temko. That Fudo, a good old boy, he from Texas. Shinshindo Coffee House brick fountain. Stone tree, new leaves, now a new electrical garden lamp on metal pole, as in Mrs. Blah's patio/barbecue area. Chagrin Falls, Ohio. The latest incarnation of the frog child tries to ride my newt red tricycle that groans and squeals. Delicious croissants. I can still feel happy here. How come? I'm too fond of eggplant ever to be allowed into heaven, but imagine celestial brinjal, aubergines du paradis. Anachronism. Homesick for one of the chief cities of Ohio. Process for correcting chromatic aberration in camera and other lenses. One of the most wonderful and magical actions we can perform, let something alone. Refuse to allow yourself the pleasure of messing it up. The thing appears to want adjusting, improving, cleaning up, etc. Appears so to us, but as a collection of event particles, a section of the universe as a noisy morning, etc., leave it alone. Don't tamper with it. Free of that poor-ass Oregon down-home history, as this clear water streaming over head, eyes, face, I can see hollyhocks 10 feet high sideways. To go and to stay illusory, I flee pale music. I know what I'm doing night and day. I flee death's pale music. Well, what? Fleeing death's proud music. Get up out of there, my father used to say. You can't sleep your life away. People die in bed. But I am tired of all the world with notebook and pen. I hurl myself deep among the dopey sheets to bed and lock the gates, shopping among the sand at the bottom of a birdcage, every grain a universe designed by Walter Lantz. Non-skid, never fail plastic whose colors fade, all surfaces dim and grubby, all of them scraped, minutely scored, cracked and flawed, material resistant to ordinary wear. Allegorical painting, cupidity deceived by advertising. The canary in residence is terribly intelligent and infested with mites. Rudy toot toot was the sound of the little 44. Frankie wasted her faithless lover. Whenever I asked people what all that meant, they said, never mind, row the boat, Norman, row. Hot weather erodes my powers. At the Ishi Yamadera, small room with bow viewing of the moon explains, she looks at the moon through that window that you see over there. She is now a wax dummy with a face that exhibits what the Japanese think of as, quote, refined features. All dressed up in high-end court robes, long black hair down her back. In the antechamber, a smaller dummy represents girl child attendant, grinding ink at a large inkstone. The figure of Murasaki holds a writing brush and a long piece of paper. Her head has begun to turn away from the writing to observe the moon, and quite likely to remark upon the song the Guisu scholars, Japanese and Western, say she never did, never was here a minute. The priest shows a sutra copied out in Murasaki's own handwriting. Here's the very inkstone that she used. There's the moonlight window. Dog days, 10 years. I try to remember your face. You disappear. All my head can see are 2 paintings and drawing and red ink. Whatever else I've done with my life amounts to nothing. But inside the lantern, a white speckled black beetle, not quite as large as a rice bird, gives complete performance of Siegfried all alone. I am a hunting and gathering culture. The Moselle wine boat sails over icy Delaware on gossamer wing through the woods to sky. Hurrah for Miss Flora MacDonald. Under the shadow of those trees, edge of typhoon, sudden rain, shelter at Basho's Rakushisha hut, green persimmons next door to Princess Uchiko, her tomb, famous for her Chinese poems, first priestess of Kemu Shrine. Under the shadow of those trees, waiting for the boat, Sater, poem immense at Drolatique, night, morning, Greyhound bus, Nevada, Avenue driver, all on different schedules. Quel sentiment, quelle délicatesse. Who shall be first to arrive? Chaos is an ideal state. None of us has ever experienced it. We are familiar with confusion, muddle, and disarray. True disorder is inaccessible to us. The sense of beauty rests gratified in the mere contemplation or intuition, regardless whether it be a fictitious Apollo or a real Antinous. Coleridge, Notebook, 1814. White noise, Brownian motion, spinthariscope, cosmic rays.
I look out for a moment from behind the Great Book Mountain, feeling like Lemuel Gulliver. This isn't exactly what means. Example, big headquarters mountain, temple of whatever Buddhist sect. Distraction, assemblage of eggs, green onions, butter, and amethyst crystals on top of the kitchen cabinet, a mountain of quartz crystals, a whole set, 90 yen worth, of red beans gone up in smoke while I rummage 3 dictionaries, 4 different texts in 3 incomprehensible languages, minestrone for all sentient beings. Get me out of here. Boil me out of the word ocean. I wish to God I never see your face nor heard your lion tongue. And so knocked over my drink, and now I have a pants full of cold, sweet coffee, hop up all out of the way, and white shirt all stained on account of G.M. Hopkins. Quote, what do then? How meet beauty? Merely meet it, own, home at heart, heaven's sweet gift, then leave. Let that alone. Yeah, wish that though, wish all God's better beauty, grace. Whatever any of that means. To what serves mortal beauty? I am suddenly spastic, brainless, flailing arms and feet, complete total mess. Rush home, underwear, hair, and wristwatch, all pockets full of coffee syrup. Take a bath to get rid of it before the ants can find me. Poor Hopkins imagined he had it completely under control, set, framed, and crystallized. It all explodes. Iced coffee in 10 directions, 3 worlds. He had to be a priest. Poetry was some other trip forced on him, squirting out every nozzle, pore, and orifice. I must have been reaching for my notebook with both hands and several more. I wanted to copy that message here. Some arm and fingers held the Hopkins book, yet other hands reaching for a pen. Did I yell, I wonder? Which of these hands, arms, elbows knocked the glass towards me? Coffee and sugar leaping in capillaries of my brain. Coffee or sleep, thick and sweet, heavy chocolate hours of morning deliberately. And now 10:30 a.m., washed and broken away from books and music, I sit with my feet melting in bright, invisible mountain water that lies above brown chocolate mud and fir needles and little sticks 2 inches or 20 feet below, impossible to judge because of stillness and clarity of water, smooth and heavy as cloth of cold black transparent stream. Anyway, I thought that was the reason. Swami Vivekananda, quote, like an insane person, I ran out of our house. He asked me, what do you want? I replied, I want to remain immersed in samadhi. He said, what a small mind you have. Go beyond samadhi. Samadhi is a very trifling thing. In the capital, the commonest materials, mud, plain paper, a couple of boards, and a bush, and a rock, a handful of straw, stuff we think of as worthless, throw it away, certainly not to use for building a house, but set here in proportion and specific spatial relation and order of decorum and respect for themselves out of nothing at all, a house and garden that can't last more than 10 minutes, very quietly stays forever. Here at the edge of town, people visit me as they used to hike up Sook Mountain or to the Sourdough Lookout. They sidle up and say, aren't you kind of lonely up here all alone? I have to lie and say, sometimes, because they look injured and rejected if I say no. The truth is that living in remote and foreign places takes a lot of work every day. No time to feel sad and friendless. The neighborhood barber watches my hair walk by jealously. So much for the law of karma. Where is Los Angeles? Where is Los Angeles? In among the mini bombs and maxi tunes, cloud altocumulus, as appears above islands far at sea. Oh, California, lardy-dar. What is California? Nothing but South Alaska. Quote, see how Canada comes me cranking in and cuts me from the best of all my land, a huge half moon, a monstrous cantle out, northern Chile. I didn't know what I was getting into until it was very late, and now I am a freak. Oh, California, a great big freak. Ugh, almost white granite with little stars, juniper trees, and high California, recollected at a great distance. Every place else forgot, thinking, moon still important at the capital, and les mémoires des vraies lois. An awfully large number of us had our heads bent with nowhere theories presented in beguiling books, Marx and Lenin, Freud and Jung, Churchill and Lord Keynes, Kafka and Kierkegaard, in spite of or on account of which becoming cannon fodder for sadist politicians and patients of expensive quacks. How come? In short, he bid me to go to Fountainhead and read Aristotle, Cicero, Avicenna, and did call the near Tyrrell's shit breeches. Aubrey's Life of William Harvey. I suspect you can be as nutty with a head full of Greek and Latin, but maybe less easily imposed upon, and perhaps a little less dangerous. Anthony Wood, Life and Times. In this month, May, was to be seen at Fleur de Luz Inn at Oxford, a brazen head that would speak and answer. Neighbors knew iron gate sound, bones of my right arm and elbow. Always America, always a line of people, 10 or 15 of them, all very smart, waiting at the madhouse door to their parents' bedroom, walking in their sleep. What time is it? What does dromedary actually mean? Cancel my subscription to track service. Banana trees, now at their best, but the most exciting green is rice in the paddy just beginning to produce ears of grain, middle of August, shimmering subliminal green waves and secret power vibes. Maybe high quality emeralds can do a similar job. However, the rice is alive, to be eaten later or brewed into sake, and so transports us out of Oregon Skull, the sea's defective music as a passing bull suborns 11, I can tell. Away, thou fondling motley humorist. An overdose of America. Money and too many decibels. Miss Janice, climb up on a white snow horse, never climb down no more. Oh, sunflower, moldy, with grime and etc., waste and want. Sung flower? An overdose of pure London took Jimi Hendrix away. Rueful again, the piteous bagpipes went, oh, bagpipe, thou didst steal my heart away. Flood music is the sweetest, my fair lady. Of late, 2 dainties were before me placed. John Keats also lost. That's going to be him. See how monkey face slips down over great seal eyes and proliferation of curves from working too fast with epiperoxylin cools. Yukio Mishima, novelist, playwright, actor, suicide by elegant Japanese tradition. Produces the effect of an infinite territory. What? With only one possible namer in color. What? Monads? No, not nomads. No, that idea was discredited. Can't work. David Hume. What about Volvox colonies? Universe of spheres containing spheres, all individual, all neighbors with independent spheres inside, so beautifully bush bomb. Never mourned. No eyes. What fern? The effect of uninterrupted acceleration, however familiar the tracks, certain contact plates prepare trees, light up animals, move, sing, laugh in the dark. Emeralds. Gone.
I drink bad, expensive Italian wine beside the Como River. They say you've taken a new lover. Passengers on Sanjo Bridge, liaison profile, now all marvelously smudged by pen of hispid friend. Bottled somewhere near Florence, I expect. All the customers in here will rise and applaud when I leave this place. They have been profoundly edified by the spectacle of a certified foreigner gobbling up a pizza with his fingers, drinking a bottle of wine without falling off his chair. A scene of life at the Capitol. I haven't been drunk for a long time. Reminds me of you, before we all became dope friends. When was your last trip? I went cuckoo on LSD the 30th of April. There's already been a great deal said about wine, and I'm reading the faggoty part of the anthology, thinking of you instead of naked boys. Curious elision. I've drunk 0.475 liter of Chianti, much too fast. Antinori. Antenor was a mythological, what did he do? Yazon sadder and smaller than Mount Koya, but still a mountain in several senses, even though they drive buses to it. The buses go home at night, the trees take over. You can step out of temples into rhododendron flowers. Ruins. Path which Maskodani followed 7 days in rain, priest robes, shaman hat, straw sandals too small. Would wild monkeys attack him? Reciting Hanya Shingyo, wherever stone marker on the trail shows where temple was. What was I saying? Talking to you? A slow green train leaves for Uji. A slow green train arrives from Osaka, immediately departs. I just realized that all I've said for the past 10 years was addressed to you, simple and flat as that. Kite, not the toy, a living bird, sails above Kamogawa. That same goddess in worldly form dips and swings far below a northbound airplane. Kiri! The hawk flies up to heaven. I have to write this at home with a new pen. I pitched the other one into the kamo the moment it lifted from writing "Re!" to the complete consternation and horror of the other guests. Now this Antenor has a curious history. Brother-in-law to Priam, king of Troy, he betrayed the Palladium to the Greeks, that they might capture the capital. He escaped with his family to found New Troy in Italy, Venice or Padua. The father of the prophet Laocoon, Pius Anus, founded the second Troy at Rome. Noble Brutus founded Troynovant, alias London, capital of the world. It is said in the book of poetry, the hawk flies up to heaven, the fishes leap in the deep. Horror and chagrin at other patrons who carefully preserve their papers, ink and brushes and ink, stones in elegant lacquer boxes. Writing is a serious action presided over by a god, Tenjino mi kami-sama, at the Kitano shrine. All these worlds change faster than I can tell you. I have this reading and writing habit which I cultivate, excessively perhaps, little time for anything else, although it's fun to ride the Osaka Zipper, 48 minutes for 65 miles, fast asleep to Yodoyabashi branch, Bank of America. Sound asleep, we leave the capital, rainy night, boats which children might have made from apple boxes. Passengers remaining awake rattle their beads, call on Amida Buddha and Kwanon to save them. Under the cushions and the goza matting, I feel the planks bulge as they slide, snail foot, over boulders and rocks. For in the middle of the river, safe and dry, sound asleep, left So Temple, Yamazaki Bridge at sundown. Early morning waken to shouts, boat swarm harbor of Naniwa. Thanks to gods of Sumiyoshi. Vegetable nerves, cold noodle time in the capital. I got to kick my coffee habit. Anybody seen my tranks? Remind me, how is Steve Carey? Halos which the angels left behind. Empty niches where holy saints once hand-hewn bases for noble columns. Garden decorations. Wintermin. Chlorpromazine hydrochloride 12.5 milligram tabs. Motion sickness, vomiting of pregnancy, potentiating effects on hypnotics and analgesics, psychoneurosis such as anxiety neurosis, bedwetting, polyuria. Did you say bum trip or dumb trip? Gardening, cleaning the ofuro, spilling the tea, I'm going crazy. Sweating, freezing, the sky overcast, hot woolly clouds shove my head under cold water. Dry it off and start over. The barber's lady assistant shaved the rostra of my ears. Before this day is out, a great pink peony shall have bloomed. Note expensive leather hollyhock. All pink, all carved out of the interior of my eye, Brancusi. I've won every marble. Now I'm running mad, gardening, little circular trips. Dirt produces infinite weed babble. My hands know it. My eyes blunk out, don't see. Hands read garden. I can catch the sun if I stop grabbing and turn my hand over. The sun falls into my open palm, a sun much larger than we first imagined. We live in its atmosphere. If you want something, hold out an empty hand. Newly opened peony, delicate camphor perfume box. If you want a poem, find a blank page. As if America were the final utterance of the human race, a culmination and the end, land of the greed and home of the knave. Most of my compatriots will never learn that the human race is not the same thing as white Protestant population of USA, that civilization means neither Metropolitan Opera Company nor modern American hospital. I'd like to catch up with whoever it was that placed these weird creatures forever in my cure, crowned my goofy dome with red hat, mitre, and magic oils. This isn't my job. I mustn't resign. Kite wheels above, bridge of the changing moon. That's the end of that. My head so packed with contradictory orders and theories and categorical imperatives and messages from various power systems from far beyond the tomb. It's no wonder that my eyes don't focus and I'm plagued by asthma, headaches, and a fat habit of body. Did this head packing job happen by accident or design? Part of it is cultural, part of it free public education, part hereditary dullness, ignorance, hankering, and attachment. What did he say? Please don't disturb me. I'm busy packing the smaller, finer blood vessels of my brain with peanut butter. What did he say? I don't know. But it may be useful, he said, writing it in his notebook. Sound and perfumes twist in the evening air. If I may be allowed to mistranslate the poet. Sri Ramakrishna, is it dusk now? If it is, I won't smoke. During the twilight hour of the dusk, you should give up all other activities and remember God, saying this. He looked at the hairs on his arm. He wanted to see whether he could count them. If he could not, it would be dusk. The pink vacuum cleaner died. Now the soul wanders the garden, blue, green, black, butterfly. There, that's for the abyss. Now we swing around, holding on to the disgusting fur of that noxious body, placing our heads where our feet were. The sun, the sun, the sun. Blake shows it. Whether setting or rising, we all hang together, Benjamin Franklin, engraved, bas-relief on bloody sky. Plain long and short spikes coming away from it, Statue of Liberty crown. Isn't this extraordinary? It only happens in the capital when I'm there. 3 imperial residences within walking distance. Great fat bird, light through colored water. Fancy glass urns, painted water, break out across perforations. Peel coating of protected paper. For madness, soak in warm water to which a teaspoonful of ordinary baking soda has been added. Twist cap on tight. Then shall be said or sung. Sang ridges, them sang ridges. We've got to have a lot of them sang ridges. And chocolate. You can always take more, you know. Several books by Henry James. Ring bell 3 times. Offer incense, ring gong for each of 3 rye high. The rage of Aquarius, 3 kinds of chocolate, rummy, which is filled with raisins and rum syrup, chocolate strawberry cream, and black, which is bittersweet. Across the street from the police box, the rage of Antinous. Cut or tear along dotty lines. Hit gong again, 2nd incense offering. Everybody chant. Plum blossoms, white, and also red ones. Peppermint stripe camellias, white ones resembling gardenia, yellow flowers of rape eaten as sukimono, rapeseed oil, waterproof paper umbrella. Tiny but fat, green, gold-eye bird, the light all new and different.
High-test flowers cure every time. Feeling well is important and relaxes the brain. Beneficent flower vibrations continue a day or so. Now time for high-test chocolate and imaginary colors, plum trees at Kitano, Tenmangu, Jinsha. Maybe I revisit tomorrow when nobody is there. I must have a secret book. Above the door to the chancel, inside Daikakuji Zenden, 2 swallows' nests, each with a little flat board underneath to catch the drippings, exactly as if this were out of doors, where kids are picnicking in the cold all around Osawa Pond, which place, like 1 or 2 other lakes and wells, are only authentic remains of the Heian capital, being fireproof and without military value, and both sides of all the wars were Japanese. Everybody liked the flowers, grass and trees planted around the shores. One small mud hen labors across the water. At Arashiyama, the flowers are late. Everybody is here anyway, walking under the cherry trees. They eat and play on the river, drink sake and sing. The cherries will be obliged to bloom no matter what weather. Man, all wrapped in transparent plastic, sloops along the wet street reciting political speech, bullhorn slung on his shoulder. I thought first a sound truck had crawled onto my doorstep to die. Sun and secret perfume breeze, all greens vibrating, the dogs in the corral roaring and running. We circled them. Our horses raving foam, splash my lavender hakama, green hunting robe over yellow kimono. Lady Westgate and Lady Plum spent an hour quarreling over my hair, setting lacquer cap with horsehair blinkers. Will it be a sprig of cherry bloom or twig of spirea? Lady Plum in tears. Arashiyama, Korean ladies all in blue silk, walking circle dance under blossoms, drum and gong, folk song and shoulder slung bullhorn. I haul on the reins, the horses dance to the left, blood mixed with its foam as I fire arrows among screaming dogs. Lord Akiba throne, heavy brocade, Karaginu, and green hakama his older brother wore last year. Not a dog was hit, the old men say. When we were young, all the dogs ended like sea urchins, gently waving spikes above the sand. Hiezan and the eastern hills dark blue. Old ladies with false nose mustaches, a slow comic drum dance with beer bottle spouting paper plume foam semen. Cherry blossom shadow. Embankment of Oi River. Young men in a circle drink and yell and sing. One performs tanuki prick dance with big sake bottle, sometimes held out before his crotch, sometimes hid under his shirt. Unexpected future lurks in Joy Belly. He is tanuki, magical badger. Wandering rusty kimono, faded fags, samizen chaunts, antique lays to picnickers. Wandering showbiz drum and samisen team, young man with family and friends and battery-driven electrical guitar. Sound of drum and gong prevail, but a whole school of lady koto players, best kimono and Japanese hairdo, perform on tatami platform underneath falling blossoms, black hair, bright silk. Elderly beer glass and bottle grandpa pursues green silk Korean lady across the pattern of the dance. She escapes and he's discomfited. Clang of gong hit with sock full of sand. Big spindle drum hung on grandpa. Subtle goom, goom. Small gong tinkle clanks, big gong clong. Blue silk ladies of a certain age. The dances of Kudara. The music of Shiragi. Tanuki badger, supernatural. Rules. Traveler's reed hat, big sake jar, grinning mouth and blaring eyes. Grand swag, belly over small upstanding prick. Huge balls hang to the ground, spirit of mischief, wine and lechery, long bush-tailed, thick fur, nocturnal habits. Badger is a feeble translation, much more like big raccoon bear, fat, breathless, pop-eyed manifestation of the divine spirit. Not a bad representation of the present writer. Japan is a civilization based upon an inarticulate response to cherry blossoms. So much for Western civilization. Mr. Franklin, is it a setting or a rising sun? Try to be serious. Try to get to Toji tomorrow. Try to remember that I accidentally found birthplace of Shinran Shonin when I visited Hokkaiji. Magnolias and cherries at Daigoji. Unprecedented splendor. Look into the abyss and enjoy the view. All we see is light. All we don't see is dark. We know lots of other things with other senses. Various kinds of new green weeds pop up through white gravel. Chicago, Federal Court, USA versus Dellinger et al., number 69, Crim 108. Mr. Kunstler, the whole issue in this case is language. What is meant by Mr. Thomas Hayden, a defendant. We were invented. Poetry, American. See under American poetry. In the USA, Calliope is a steam piano. Nobody ever figured out that Sir Gawain's Green Knight was a crocodile. Pace Ivor Winters.
Revisit Kitano plum blossoms. Pink ones have strong perfume. Big tree in front of central sanctuary. Gongen Zukuri architecture. Sugawara Michizane was incarnation, Gongen, of this deity, who presides over plum blossoms and calligraphy and scholarship. So hollow and full of holes, it scarcely exists at all, but blossoms immensely before scarlet fence, intricate wooden gables, another all propped up with poles and timbers, part of it fixed with straw rope, exploding white blossoms, not only from twigs and branches, but from shattered trunk itself, old and ruined, all rotted and broken up. These plum trees function gorgeously a few days every year in a way nobody else does. At the Capitol, 44 to 46 Showa, 25th January.
Thank you so much, David. And thank you to all our readers. And thank you to all of you who attended and came over from Crowdcast into Zoom. All have a very good night. Be well.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you, David.
And everyone is welcome to leave, but if there is anyone who has any questions, I'm happy to field them. Good night,
Hey,
y'all.
David, talk a little bit about the way that he used kind of the cut-up method to kind of work on this text.
Yeah, thank you, Peter. That's a lot of what the essay that I wrote that's in the new edition from Wave is about, is my exploration of that method that Whalen used, which is really approaching his manuscripts and kind of chopping them up. And my intention, or my attention was brought to this first by Leslie Scalpino, who was a friend of Whalen's and who was mentored by Whalen in many ways, and who is one of the only people to really write about his work. And she quotes him talking about the way that he would lay his notebooks out on the floor and kind of just pick different elements from them and kind of, cut and paste them into a poem. And I wanted to understand more about like what that actually looked like. I knew from Leslie's essays and from talking to people who knew Philip that this was his method, but I wanted to know more about it. And so his notebooks and archive are all found at the Bancroft at UC Berkeley. And they include the large notebooks that Catherine was showing images from before, which I call his Kyoto notebooks. He lived in Japan twice, and Scenes of Life was written in his second time there. And it was basically like his day book. It's full of quotations, journal entries, stuff he wrote when he was high, kind of all of the above. And there's a process of redaction of that material where he like kind of boils it down. And you can really trace that in the notebooks, what he chooses to keep, what he chooses to cancel, what he moves around. It mostly keeps the flow of the editing keeps the temporal flow of when he wrote, although there is some remixing, but there's a lot of condensation, a lot of removal of signifiers to tell you kind of when you are. But I think, you can see when he wrote the poem because there are markers, temporal markers that are in the poem, like the death of Kerouac, the death of Olson, Kent State, and other things like that tell you that he was writing. I mean, he was writing in direct response to Kent State, so we know he's writing in 1970. But he removes like a lot of the markers, so you can't tell like, is he asleep or is he awake? Is he straight or is he high? Like what day is this? Do I wake or do I sleep? Do I fake or do I leap? And so, I feel like I learned a lot from studying those manuscripts, and I hope that other people can, learn something from the formal qualities that you allude to. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that's very helpful. Yeah, it's good to hear. Anybody else? Well, in that case,
Yeah,
Night,
I've got one question. Let me ask a question. Is the text of the Wave Books edition exactly the same as the old Four Seasons edition?
It's close, but it's not exactly the same. I've been working on this project for about 5 years. And when I first approached it, brought it to Wave, we discussed a number of different possibilities in terms of how this book could be represented to the public. And I did archival research in several cities to unearth the different stages of the composition, from the original handwritten manuscript to the typescripts and pre-book publications that Whalen put in magazines. And so there's enough material actually for like a variorum edition and a scholarly edition that shows kind of how it migrated from the first state of the text to the final text. But what we ended up deciding in conversation with Wave's editorial team is that a trade edition would be the most valuable at this point. And so we kind of went, instead of creating a sort of critical edition, we went largely with the text that Whalen himself supervised in the publication of the 70 edition with Donald Allen. He sent it to Allen. He was there, he was there when it was published in Bolinas. So there's every reason to believe that it's as, he wanted it. The one thing that I did change, I mean, there are a few little things, but one of the big ones for me is early on the first page of the poem, he says, "Loosen up, festoon," right? And in the manuscript, he writes "loosen up, festoon," but in between the manuscript and the Gray Fox Four Seasons edition, he changes it to "loosen up, festoon," and puts a T in loosen to ring with the T in festoon. And it's a very small, very perverse little change, much like your dope friends. But the poem is like full of those things, which also makes it really hard to edit, because you're like, is this a typographical error, or was he like, just having fun? And so, there are a few little changes like that. The Wesleyan edition does not have loosen up; it has loosen up. So, but it largely does. To answer your question, Andrew, it largely follows that Gray Fox text.
Thanks. Yeah.
Yeah, speaking as a bookseller, I think it was a great idea to make it available and accessible in a trade edition.
Well, one of the things that I talk about in the afterword is just that it's sort of incomprehensible to me that a poet of Whalen's stature remains so kind of like, he's really a poet's poet. And he's best known for who he was friends with, more famous people. But I think his work is really important. And we also know it's important because he was a mentor to so many, in order to do this work, I spoke with Alice Notley, I spoke with Joanne Kiger, with Diane DePrima, all of whom identify, and Leslie Scalapino, of course, is in this number, poets, really important American poets who are mentored by Whalen. And so I hope that this book and the republication will represent, a sort of occasion for renewed interest in his work, and sort of like some more serious study. As y'all saw in my kind of live annotations in the chat, this is also like, and you'll see it if you read the afterword as well, this is a very dense and erudite poem, even though it also like seems very goofy and random. But there's a lot to say about it. And before this essay, there's very little in writing. There's no previous critical treatment of this poem that unearths the sources. And as far as I'm concerned, this is one of the major American poems of the 20th century. So being the first person to sort of seriously annotate it felt a little bit like being the first person to take a crack at Ezra Pound's cantos. I was like, this is a big job. And we could have approached it like, let's have a commentary on the text. But that would have been, I think, very contrary to Whalen's own spirit to sort of smother it under erudition. He wore his erudition lightly. He didn't become an academic. He became a monk, so he had a very different approach to what even erudition was for. So some of that information, that erudition is addressed in the afterword, but we didn't go with the full on, like, here's every Japanese place name glossed and so forth.
Hey, thanks to you and to Wave Books for bringing that poem, like sort of disinterring it from the huge coffin of the collected poems. I mean, as a teacher, I could never assign, a 600-page volume that costs, I don't know what now, it's out of print, but, an astronomical amount. But to have this poem is so good, by itself. This is something that really happens to our elders as they get, as Basil Bunting said, it's the nails in the coffin as the big collected poems. And really important to have these poems available in a readable edition where they're not daunting to somebody. They're not just like a little fragment of a gigantic brick that's much better suited to propping up your car, blocking the tires on your car, than to actually reading. So thanks, David. I really appreciate it. And to Wave Books. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Andrew, for saying that. And yeah, Anselm was remarking earlier that that Wesleyan Collected is now selling used for like $50 and $60, which I had no idea. That's really a shame. And I hope that it, can be brought back into print, because it does represent the fullest collection of Whalen. But those of us who are, book fans, and especially people who worked in the book trade and in the Bay Area, as Andrew and Owen Hill, who's also on the call, former Moe's people, that, part of the charm of Whalen and part of is the little books, that he has many little books. He was well published in the 60s and 70s, and they're all kind of beautiful objects. They're not precious objects, but they're beautiful. And he made a very specific intention in putting all of his books together, including on Bear's Head, which is the kind of previous selected poems, or his first selected poems, because there was the collection from Penguin called Overtime. But his first selected poems, which is kind of an event back when it was first published, is a very funny collection, and he wanted it that way. So although the Wesleyan collection is really worth having for the big fan, it unbinds the books, the original books, and puts everything in chronological order. So you don't quite get that charm of how Whalen, sort of arranged things once he wrote them, which was very intentional. And I talk a little bit about this as well in the afterword.
I once asked him how he put his books together, and he said, I just grab whatever poems are around and throw them into a manuscript and send it off. But that's not how he worked at all. He was actually extremely deliberate, I think, about putting his books together. And
yeah, for sure. Definitely so. Do folks have any other questions? We'd be happy to field anything. I know it's a lot. I was remarking, even though I edited this book, and I've been living with it for 5 years. Well, longer than 5 years. I've been living with it as an editor for 5 years and for longer than that. There's always new stuff and stuff I don't clock somehow. And it's part of how this poem works. And when I was talking with Joanne Kiger, the now unfortunately late Joanne Kiger, about the poem, she, was one of the people who remarked to me, like, she reread it and she was like, how does this poem work? Like, it works, but how? And I think that's one of the sort of abiding mysteries, is like, and part of why I went to study it as a poet, a practicing poet myself, is to learn something about how a long poem is written, because, to create something that can hold together over this duration is not easy. And most people can't really sustain it. And especially when it's as random feeling and weird as this poem is, but somehow it works. And I think there are very specific reasons that Whalen had in mind that are hiding under the goofiness. And part of that works from the motifs that he injects. And again, this is stuff I talk about in afterwards, around like the question of the capital and what is the capital. It's not just Kyoto where he wrote the poem, but it's the many other world capitals as he's meditating on empire. And also, this is really a poem about Vietnam, right? And he, and what it's like to be an American at a time when the actions of America are intolerable, and so it's also saturated with, he has that line about, it must be possible to find some sane way to live in America without being rich and drunk and high all the time, and he was really wrestling with this issue at a time when other people like Bruce Conner is another one, were fleeing America and living in temporary exile because everything was so insane, so I feel like that also communicates in an important way to this epoch, of course. He has the line about, every white American, almost every white American has the spiritual nature of a Chicago policeman, right? So, that feels pretty relevant in 2020, unfortunately. As well as we talk about Nero in the White House, but who reflects about the Caligula waiting in the provinces, right? And so now that we have Caligula, it is also relevant.
Even the trumpery mockery.
Yeah.
Could he see into the future? I mean, so much of the book is so extremely relevant.
Well, I was cracking up because I think it was maybe during Aisha's reading that we have the line, the zooming of the earth. And here we are in the zooming of the earth, so on Zoom right now. So, it feels like what you said, can he see the future? Like, I've talked with a lot of poets, including poet Louis Friedman, who talked about Whalen as a time traveler and the way that you can construct poems basically to have that trans-temporal resonance, which is really mysterious, but it seems like a quality of language that you can bring out through poetic work. And that, to me, like I always say about On Bear's Head, it's my favorite book to open at random, because like Sortes Virgiliana, like they used to do with the Aeneid, because you'll always open to something that's just happened or that's relevant to your day. Once I opened it on the beach in California and it was like a poem about being on the beach in California, I was like, okay. Or like once I opened it on my birthday and it was like, happy birthday, so it's like, it's very magical. And I think he, a lot of his work has that quality. I see that Anselm said in the chat something about the relevance of page 32 to his dad's poems. Anselm, do you want to say something about that?
He might have stepped away.
Oh, okay.
I think he just said that page 32 in the Wave edition had rhythms that were influential to his dad's poems.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
I love that. Yeah, and I talked with Alice Notley a bunch about this poem. She was very close with Whalen, and she read this and sent me some of the critical writing that she did about, she actually wrote it for the Poetry Project newsletter when the big Wesleyan Collected came out, but that's a place where she has extended reflections on scenes of life, which I quote in my essay. But she was very close with Philip, and one of my favorite things that she told me is that she was really bummed when he became a monk, because he shaved his head. And she was like, so much of his charisma was in his hair. And I just thought that was a really funny observation. I always think of him from later photos, but he has, he had facial hair and long hair. It's a very different look. More like the look we associate with Ted Berrigan, actually. All right, everybody, last chance. Any other burning questions?
Well, I just want to say thank you so much, David, for all your notes throughout the reading, for making this reading possible tonight. And thank you, Peter, for co-hosting with us. Really appreciate it. I did put a link so that if anyone doesn't have a copy of Scenes of Life at the Capitol, they can do so through City Lights.
And this has all been recorded, so I guess Wave will probably send out a link for the YouTube, and so you're welcome to share this. And Hoa has just put in what I think is probably the best possible closing note, one of my favorite lines from the book, minestrone for all sentient beings. So that's a bodhisattva prayer that I think we can all get behind. And with that, good night and good luck.
Good night. Thank you.
Good night, y'all.